An 8-year-old boy with a strong sense of right and wrong, Liam always believed in protecting the people he loved, no matter how difficult it was. One day, on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his father's life, Michael, Liam makes a decision that would change everything. As he watches his dad about to marry Claire, a woman who's been hiding dark secrets, Liam steps forward to reveal a shocking truth that no one could have imagined. Her bold move stops the wedding in its tracks, but what happens next leaves everyone stunned. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of the small chapel, casting a warm glow on the guests. The air vibrated with excitement as friends and family chatted in low tones, staring at the entrance. At the altar, Michael Matthews stood tall in his crisp black tuxedo, a nervous smile on his lips as he waited for his bride-to-be. "You look great, Dad," Liam whispered, fidgeting with the little pillow in his hands. The boy's curly hair was neatly combed, and his tiny suit matched his father's. But as Michael smiled with joy, Liam's brown eyes reflected concern. Michael winked at his son, giving him a reassuring gesture. "Thank you, champion. You're the best ring-bearer a dad could ask for." She ruffled Liam's hair affectionately, not noticing the anxiety etched on the boy's face. The first notes of the wedding march began to sound, and the congregation rose to its feet. They all turned their heads toward the chapel doors, eager to see the bride. Everyone except Liam. The boy's gaze remained fixed on his father, his small hands squeezing the pillow of the ring so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The doors opened, revealing Claire in all her bridal splendor. She walked down the aisle, a vision of white lace and silk, her golden hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders and her blue eyes shining with excitement as she approached the altar. Michael's face lit up with pure adoration. "You look beautiful," Michael whispered as Claire took her place next to him. She smiled back, her voice barely audible. "I can't wait to start our life together." The officiant began the ceremony, his words flowing over the attendees, but for Liam every moment that passed felt like an eternity. He moved from one foot to the other, his eyes jumping between his father and Claire. To anyone who watched him, it might have seemed like simple nervousness, but there was something deeper, more urgent about his behavior. As he stood, Liam was lost in his memories of the past few months. His mind wandered back to the day his father, Michael, first introduced him to Claire. It was an autumn afternoon when Michael picked up Liam from school, his face lit up with excitement. "I've got someone special that I want you to meet, champion," he'd said, practically bouncing in his seat as they drove home. Liam remembered how his stomach had twisted with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Since his mother had passed away 2 years earlier, it had been just him and his father. The thought of someone new entering their lives filled him with uncertainty. When they got home, Claire was waiting for them on the porch, her golden hair catching the evening light. She smiled warmly as they approached, and Liam couldn't help but notice how his father's eyes lit up at the sight of her. "Liam, this is Claire," Michael said proudly in his voice. Well, it's become very important to me, and I hope it becomes important to you as well." Claire crouched down at Liam's level, her blue eyes twinkling. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Liam," he said softly. "Your dad talks about you all the time." At that moment, Liam felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, after all, this wouldn't be so bad. But as the weeks passed, that hope began to fade. Liam noticed how Claire was different when her father wasn't around. The warm smiles disappeared, replaced by cold looks and frowns. One night in particular stood out in Liam's mind. Michael had worked late and Claire was supposed to take care of Liam. As they sat down at the table, Liam tried to strike up a conversation. "Miss Claire," he began cautiously, "do you like space? We're learning about the solar system in school and—" "Liam!" Claire interrupted sharply, not looking up from her phone. "I'm busy right now. Eat quietly, please." Liam shrank back in his chair, pushing his food around the plate. The silence that followed was deafening. When his father was home, however, it was a completely different story. Claire would ask Liam about school, laugh at his jokes, and even ruffle his hair affectionately. But Liam could see the fakeness in his smile, the tension behind his eyes. Michael, on the other hand, was happier than Liam had seen him in years. He was practically floating around the house, humming to himself and breaking into spontaneous dances that would have embarrassed Liam if it weren't so pleasant to watch. "Isn't Claire wonderful?" Michael used to say, his eyes shining. "We're so lucky to have it in our lives, right, champion?" Liam nodded and forced a smile, not wanting to break his father's bubble of happiness. But inside, he felt increasingly lonely and confused. As the weeks turned into months, Claire's true nature became more apparent to Liam. She would start making subtle comments when Michael wasn't around, sapping his self-esteem and making him feel like a burden in his own home. On a Saturday afternoon, about 3 months before the wedding, an incident occurred that Liam couldn't get out of his head. Her father had gone out to do some shopping, leaving Liam and Claire home alone. Liam was in the room watching cartoons and drinking a glass of juice when Claire walked in. "Turn that off," he growled, pointing to the television. "He is very strong. I'm trying to work." Liam, startled, hurriedly turned off the TV and in his haste spilled the glass of juice on the coffee table and carpet. "I'm sorry," she whimpered, jumping up for napkins. "It wasn't my intention." Before he could finish, Claire was there, her fingers digging into Liam's arm as she pulled him away from the mess. "Look what you've done," he hissed, his face twisted with anger. "Clumsy and careless child." Liam shuddered from the grip, tears welling up in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'll clean it up, I promise." Claire's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You'd better do it," he growled. "And if you say a single word of this to your father, you'll regret it very much. You know what I mean." Liam nodded frantically, his heart pounding in his chest. As soon as Claire let go, she hurriedly cleaned up the mess, her hands shaking all the time. That night, when Michael returned home, Claire greeted him with a kiss and a cheerful, "How was your day, honey?" From the stairs, Liam rubbed his arm where Claire had grabbed it, feeling more alone than ever. As the wedding date approached, Liam felt the weight of his secret on his shoulders. He desperately wanted to tell his father about Claire's true nature, but fear held him back. What if Michael didn't believe her? What if it made Claire even angrier? One night, about a month before the wedding, Liam mustered up enough courage to talk to his father. Michael was in his study going through some documents when Liam timidly knocked on the door. "Go ahead, champion," Michael called, smiling as Liam entered. "What's wrong?" Liam hesitated, twisting the hem of his shirt in his hands. "Dad," he began slowly, "can I talk to you about something?" Michael put his papers aside, giving it his full attention. "Of course, son. You can talk to me about anything. What do you have in mind?" Liam took a deep breath and blurted out the words. "It's about Claire. I don't think he likes me very much." Michael's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean, Liam? Claire adores you." "No, Dad, it's not like that," Liam insisted, his words rushing in a rush to be heard. "It's different when you're not there. He ignores me, and sometimes he says bad things and—" Wait, Michael interrupted, raising a hand. She sighed, running her hand through her hair. "Liam, I know this is a big change for you. It's natural to feel a little insecure about Claire becoming part of our family, but I promise you that she cares a lot about you." "But Dad," Liam tried to say, but Michael shook his head. "There are no buts, champion. Claire's going to be your stepmother, and I need you to give her a chance. She's doing her best, and so are we. Is that okay?" Liam lowered his shoulders, defeated. "Okay, Dad," he murmured, turning to leave the room. "Hey," Michael called softly. "I love you, champion. It's going to be okay. You'll see." As Liam closed the door behind him, a wave of hopelessness washed over him. His father, the person he trusted the most, had not believed him, or, worse, did not want to believe him. From that day on, Liam stopped trying to talk to his father about Claire. Instead, he closed in more on himself, becoming quieter and more withdrawn. She began to dread family dinners and outings, knowing that she would have to pretend that everything was fine while enduring Claire's subtle criticism and contempt. Michael, absorbed in wedding preparations and his own happiness, did not notice the change in his son. He attributed Liam's silence to shyness or perhaps to a phase. He never suspected the whirlwind of emotions brewing beneath the surface. Claire, for her part, seemed to enjoy her victory. With Michael oblivious to his true nature and Liam too scared to speak, he became bolder in his mistreatment of the boy. One afternoon, Liam overheard a conversation between Claire and her friend, Sarah. "I don't know how you take it," Sarah said, laughing. "Being a surrogate mother for someone else's child? I couldn't do it." Liam stood motionless in the hallway, holding his breath to listen for Claire's response. "It's not that bad," Claire replied in a sugary voice. "Liam, well, it's part of the package, isn't it? You have to accept the good with the bad." Sarah laughed again. "You're a saint, I swear. If it were me, I would have already sent the child to boarding school." Liam didn't wait to hear Claire's response. He snuck back to his room, his appetite forgotten and feeling as if he had been punched in the stomach. Part of the package? The bad? Was that all he was to Claire? An inconvenience she had to endure to be with her dad? As the wedding day approached, Liam felt more and more trapped. He watched as his father and Claire made plans for his future, barely considering how it would affect him. When they discussed destinations for their honeymoon or redecorating the house, Liam felt like a ghost, invisible and insignificant. One night, Liam was tossing and turning in his bed, unable to sleep. The digital clock on his bedside table flashed. 11:42 p.m., its red glow casting haunting shadows throughout the room. Sighing, she decided to go get a glass of water from the kitchen. As he made his way down the hallway in his Superman pajamas, he froze at the sound of an angry voice from the living room. It was Claire. "Mark, you have to listen to me," he hissed into his phone. Liam crouched down, peeking around the corner. Claire paced back and forth, nervously running her hand through her messy hair. "We can't rush. Everything has to be perfect," he continued, his voice strained. Liam's heart was pounding. I've never heard Claire sound so agitated. It was usually all smiles and sweetness, especially around her dad. "The wedding is in 2 weeks," Claire said with obvious frustration. "Once it's done, we move on to the next phase. Yes, the insurance policy. Michael doesn't suspect anything." Liam felt short of breath. Life insurance? Phase 2? His childish mind was spinning with confusion, knowing that what he was hearing was dangerous. He knew that eavesdropping was bad, but he couldn't turn away. "Listen, Mark, I've got it under control," Claire blurted out, her voice curt. "Just follow the plan. Once we have the money, we will be made for life. No more scams, no more scares. This is our way out." Liam's breathing stopped. Money? Scams? What was Claire talking about? "Observant for his own good. But don't worry, I can handle it. Michael is completely under my control. He would never believe a word against his precious fiancée." Tears began to form in Liam's eyes. He always knew Claire didn't love him, but hearing her talk about him like that hurt more than he could have imagined. That night, sleep avoided Liam. He tossed and turned in his bed, playing Claire's words in his mind. When morning came, he staggered down to the breakfast table, where Michael and Claire were sitting, the image of a happy family. "Good morning, champ," Michael said cheerfully, ruffling his son's hair. "You look tired. Difficult night?" Liam nodded, avoiding Claire's gaze. "I couldn't sleep," he murmured. Claire's honeyed voice cut through the air. "Oh, poor thing," he said with false compassion. "You're probably excited about the wedding, right, Liam?" Liam looked up and for a brief second met Claire's eyes. He saw a flash of something cold and calculating behind his smile, and a shiver ran down his spine. "Yes," Liam lied, forcing a smile. "Excited." For the next few days, Liam watched Claire like a hawk. Now that he knew something was wrong, he began to notice things he had overlooked before. Claire was constantly on her phone, typing furiously. Whenever Michael entered the room, she would quickly lock the screen and offer him a smile. "Just chatting with the wedding planner, honey," it read, or "drama between the bridesmaids." But Liam knew it wasn't. Every once in a while, he managed to see the screen and read quick messages addressed to someone saved in his contacts as M. Mark, he guessed. Claire's absences from the house became more frequent. He would often be away for hours, making flimsy excuses. "I'm going to see some details of the wedding," she'd say cheerfully, kissing Michael on the cheek. Or, "I'll meet the girls for a dress fitting." Michael, blinded by love and busy with work, never questioned her. But Liam noticed every little detail. One afternoon, a week before the wedding, Liam was helping Michael in the garage when Claire's car pulled up in the driveway. He hurried into the house without even looking at them. "I'm going to get something to eat, Dad," Liam said, wiping his greasy hands with a rag. "Of course, champion. Bring me some soda while you're there, will you?" Michael replied, focused on fixing the lawnmower. Liam quietly entered the house, listening to Claire's muffled voice from upstairs. He climbed the stairs carefully, avoiding the third step that always creaked. "We almost got it, Mark," Claire said. He was in the guest room, which would soon be his room with Michael after the wedding. "Just a few more days. Stay calm." Liam moved closer to the door, struggling to listen. "The policy is sound," Claire continued. "Once we're married, it's going to be easy. A tragic accident, a grieving widow, and we will be made for life. Just follow the plan." Liam's blood froze. A tragic accident? Were they planning to harm their father? Suddenly, Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. Liam bent down to try to hear her words and, in his eagerness, knocked on the door lightly, causing a slight squeak. The room fell silent. Liam's heart stopped. "I have to go," Claire said quickly. "I'll call you later." Liam ran back down the hallway and hid in the bathroom, just as the door to the guest room opened. He heard Claire's footsteps stop in front of the bathroom and then slowly descend the stairs. Breathing heavily, Liam leaned against the bathroom wall. This was worse than I had imagined. Claire and this Mark weren't just after the money, they were planning to hurt their father, maybe even kill him. He had to do something, but who would believe him? Michael thought Claire was perfect, and she had spent months painting Liam as a jealous and difficult child. Would his father trust him over the woman he was about to marry? For the next few days, Liam was on high alert. He watched Claire's every move, trying to piece together the pieces of her plan. She was careful, but sometimes she made mistakes. One afternoon, Liam walked into the studio to find Claire hurriedly closing Michael's laptop. She jumped up at the sight of him, a look of guilt crossing her face. "Oh, Liam," he said in a voice too bright, "you scared me. I was just checking some guest confirmations." Liam nodded, not believing a word. As soon as Claire left the room, she walked over to the laptop. It was locked, but Liam knew his father's password. His birthday. The browser's history had been deleted, but one website remained open, that of a major life insurance company. Liam's stomach churned. This must have been the insurance policy Claire kept mentioning. He was about to dig deeper when he heard footsteps approaching. He quickly closed the laptop and pretended to be looking at the bookshelf. Michael walked in, smiling at the sight of his son. "Hey, champion, what are you doing?" "Just looking for a book," Liam lied, hating how easy it was becoming for him to lie to his father. Michael ruffled his son's hair affectionately. "That's my boy, always in books. Come on, dinner is ready." As they walked towards the dining room, Liam's mind kept racing. He had to find a way to stop Claire. The next day, Liam got his chance. Michael had a last-minute meeting at work, and Claire was out of the house, running one of her mysterious errands. With trembling hands, Liam walked over to Claire's sleek, silvery laptop. As I expected, it was protected with a password. He tried a few combinations, Claire's birthday, the wedding date, but none worked. As he was about to give up, he noticed a yellow note sticking out from under the keyboard. Carefully, he peeled it off and found a series of numbers and letters. Would it be the key? With his heart pounding, Liam wrote the code. The laptop came to life. Liam's eyes widened as he went through Claire's files. There were dozens of documents with suspicious names. Michael's schedule, policy details. He clicked on one titled Insurance Policy. A PDF file filled with legal jargon opened that Liam couldn't quite understand, but a few phrases caught his eye. Accidental death, double indemnity, $5 million payout, $5 million. Was that what his father's life was worth? Liam's hands trembled as he continued searching. He found a folder titled Simon. Inside were dozens of photos of a man she had never seen before, a tall man with dark hair and a scar over his left eyebrow. In some photos, he was alone. In others, he was with Claire, looking very close, almost as a couple. Liam felt nauseous. Claire was not only planning to hurt her father, but she was cheating on him as well. Suddenly, he heard the noise of a car in the driveway. Claire was back. In a panic, Liam closed all the windows and turned off the laptop. He barely managed to put it in place when the front door opened. "Liam," Claire called. "Are you here?" "Yes," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just doing my homework." Claire appeared at the entrance, her eyes narrowing at the sight of the scene. "Don't you usually work in your room?" Liam shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "It's quieter here." Claire stared at him for a long moment, his expression impossible to read. Then he smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. "Well, don't try too hard. Dinner will be ready soon." As he turned to leave, Liam caught a glimpse of Claire's phone screen, where she was sending a message to someone saved simply as S. Liam assumed it was Simon. That night, as he lay in his bed, his mind was spinning with everything he had discovered. Claire and Simon were planning something terrible, and the wedding was just a few days away. Time was running out. He thought about telling his father everything, but doubt overwhelmed him. Would Michael believe him? Claire had spent months painting him as a jealous and troubled child. Would his father trust him about the woman he was about to marry? In his nightmare that night, he saw Claire and the man in the pictures, Simon, laughing over a grave, his father's grave. Liam woke up startled, drenched in sweat, as the faint glow of dawn began to stream through his window. In that moment, with the remnants of the nightmare still clinging to him, he knew what he had to do. He had to stop that wedding at all costs. Now, back at the wedding, as the officiant began to speak, his words flowed over Liam like an incomprehensible buzz. All he could focus on was the growing panic in his chest, the certainty that he must do something, say something, before it was too late. "If anyone has any justified cause why this couple cannot be legally united in marriage, let them speak now or be silent forever," the officiant uttered, the traditional words hanging in the air. That was Liam's moment, but fear paralyzed him. What if he was wrong? What if no one believed him? What if he ruined everything for nothing? The officiant nodded, about to continue. Liam's heart was pounding in his ears. It was now or never. "Wait!" Liam shouted before he could stop. "Stop the wedding!" A collective gasp ran through the church. All eyes turned to Liam, who trembled instead, his small voice echoing in the sudden silence. "Liam," Michael said, turning to his son. Confusion and worry etched across his face. "What's wrong, champion?" Liam's eyes jumped between his father and Claire, who looked at him with a mixture of surprise and barely contained anger. "Dad," Liam's voice trembled, but he continued, "you can't marry her. She is not who she says she is." Michael knelt, placing a soft hand on his son's shoulder. "What are you talking about, son? Are you feeling okay?" Liam shook his head vigorously. "No, Dad, you don't understand. Claire has been lying to you. He's planning something bad." A murmur ran through the crowd. Claire let out a nervous laugh, her eyes going back and forth between Michael and the guests. "Oh, honey," he said in a sweet but tense voice. "I know this is a big change for you. It's normal to be afraid of having a new mum, but this is not the way to express it." Liam felt a surge of anger at his condescending tone. "It's not that," he shouted. "I heard you talking to Simon on the phone. I know about the insurance policy. You're planning to hurt my dad." The church fell into complete silence. Michael's face paled, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Liam, that's a very serious accusation," Michael said slowly. "Where did you hear such a thing?" "I heard them, Dad," Liam pleaded. "Late at night. I was talking to someone named Simon. They talked about money and insurance and to get rid of you after the wedding." Claire let out a laugh that sounded louder and more forced, a hint of hysteria seeping into her voice. "Michael, honey, you can't believe this. It's ridiculous," he stammered, his face pale. "Simon is my wedding planner. Of course we've talked about the policy for the ceremony and the money for the vendors and the flowers. Liam must have misunderstood." But Liam didn't back down. "Not true," he shouted with a determination he had never felt before. "I saw the insurance policy on your computer. It's millions of dollars if Dad dies, and I saw pictures of you with Simon. It's not just your wedding planner." The murmurs turned into a bustle, as the guests looked at each other with expressions of outrage and concern. Some frowned, others muttered in bewilderment, and a few rose from their seats, visibly upset. Michael froze, staring at Claire and then at his son. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Claire," he began, his tone filled with doubt and pain. "Is this true? Is there any truth to this?" Claire tried to keep her facade calm, but her eyes betrayed the panic she was trying to hide. "This is crazy!" he exclaimed, his voice rising. "I can't stand here and be accused by a spoiled child who can't bear to share his father's attention." Then he turned to Liam, his expression turning into an angry grimace. "You spoiled little brat!" she hissed, forgetting the audience in front of her. "You've ruined everything!" The murmurs in the church morphed into a collective whisper of horror. Michael backed away, unable to believe his eyes. The woman who had planned to get married was now revealing a completely different side of herself. Claire's eyes reflected a contained fury, and her mask of sweetness crumbled. "Emily," Michael said, his voice barely audible and trembling. "What have you done?" Claire realized her mistake instantly. He took a step back, trying to recompose his facade. "Oh, Michael, it's just the stress. All of this, it's too much. Liam's accusations, this ridiculous situation. I lost my temper for a moment. Surely you can understand it." But the damage was already done. Michael looked at Claire as if he were looking at a complete stranger. He grabbed Liam's shoulders and leaned toward him. "Liam," he said in a firm voice, "I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." With all eyes on him, Liam mustered his courage and began to speak. He told his father about Claire's cold demeanor when they were alone, her cruel comments and physical bullying. He recounted how he listened to the phone conversations, the suspicious messages, and the prolonged absences. He described how he had found the insurance policy on Claire's computer and photos of her with Simon. As Liam spoke, Michael's face grew paler and paler. The guests listened to him in complete silence, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others nodding as if pieces of a puzzle were fitting together. Claire stiffened, her eyes jumping between Michael, the officiant, and the exit. His mask of serenity completely crumbled, revealing a person filled with despair and coldness. "Claire," Michael said, his voice heavy with pain and betrayal, "look me in the eye and tell me none of this is true." Claire's mouth opened, but no words came out. His eyes, once filled with fake warmth, now only reflected a calculating coldness. At that moment, Michael saw the truth, and his heart was broken. "I believe," Michael said, his voice trembling, "that this wedding is over." The bustle in the church erupted. Some guests began to get up and head towards the exits. Others approached to hear better what was happening. In the midst of the chaos, Claire saw her chance. With a growl of frustration, she turned around and ran down the hall, her white dress fluttering behind her like a ghostly apparition. "Stop her!" someone shouted, but Claire was quick. She pushed the surprised guests and walked through the doors of the church, running into the bright light outside, and leaving behind her a scene of complete chaos. The church erupted in confusion as Claire fled, her white dress fluttering behind her like a ghostly vision. Michael, still reeling from the shocking revelation, reacted. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed the emergency number. "Yes, hello. I need to report a crime," Michael said, his voice trembling. "My fiance. She was planning to kill me for the insurance money. He just ran away from our wedding. Please, you have to find it." As Michael spoke to the operator, providing Claire's description and her last known address, Liam stood, motionless, overwhelmed by the tumultuous events he himself had unleashed. A mixture of relief and anxiety churned his stomach. He had saved his father, but at what price? The guests, who until a moment ago were sitting in reverent silence, were now murmuring to each other, exchanging glances of amazement and concern. Some ran outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the runaway bride, while others crowded in small groups, whispering furiously and casting furtive glances at Michael and Liam. Michael ended the call and turned to his son, his face a mask of contradictory emotions. He knelt, placing his hands on Liam's shoulders. "Liam," he said hoarsely, "I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you sooner. I should have noticed." Liam lunged into his father's arms, burying his face in Michael's shoulder. "Okay, Dad," he muttered in a muffled voice. "I'm just glad you're safe." Michael hugged him tightly, tears streaming in his eyes. For a moment, the chaos around them faded, and only the two of them, father and son, were left united against the storm. Their moment of relief was interrupted by the arrival of the police. Two officers entered the church, their presence immediately grabbing everyone's attention. The murmur of voices died, and all eyes turned to Michael and Liam. "Mr. Matthews?" asked one of the officers, approaching them. Michael stood, still with one hand on Liam's shoulder. "Yes, it's me. I'm Officer Johnson, and this is my partner, Officer Rivera," the trooper said in a firm but calm voice. "We need to ask him some questions about what happened here." As Michael began to recount the events, Liam's attention was diverted to a rampage near the entrance of the church. A tall man with dark hair and a scar over his eyebrow was pushing in, his face showing despair. Liam felt his heart soar. It was Simon. "Dad!" he whispered urgently, tugging at Michael's sleeve. "Dad! It's him! It's Simon!" Michael raised his head, following the direction of Liam's gaze. Her eyes widened as she recognized the man from the photos her son had described. "Officers," he said quickly, "that man by the door. I think he's involved in all of this. It's the one my son heard talking to Claire on the phone." The officers reacted immediately. Officer Johnson stayed with Michael and Liam, while Officer Rivera made his way towards Simon, who at the time was attempting to back up toward the exit. "Sir, stop right there!" shouted Officer Rivera. Simon froze for a moment, his eyes searching for a way out. Then, in a panicked fit, he turned and ran to the door. Officer Rivera began the chase, yelling over his radio for backup. The guests watched in amazement as Officer Rivera disappeared through the doors of the church, chasing Simon. Officer Johnson turned to Michael in a calm but firm voice. "Mr. Matthews, I think it would be best for you and your son to accompany us to the police station to make a full statement. We need to gather all the evidence they have regarding Claire's plans." Michael nodded, still in shock. "Of course, we will do whatever it takes." He leaned into Liam, his voice softer. "Liam, champion, are you okay to go with us to the police station?" Liam nodded bravely, though his heart was still pounding. "Yes, Dad, I want to help." As they prepared to leave, Michael's best friend and best man Jack approached them with a worried expression. "Mike," he said, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder, "what do you want us to do here?" Michael, clearly overwhelmed by the events, ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Jack," he said in a trembling whisper. "Tell everyone to go home. Excuse me for me. I can't face this right now." Jack nodded understandingly. "Don't worry about it, buddy. I take care of everything here. You take care of yourself and Liam, okay?" "Thank you, Jack," Michael replied with a faint smile. "I don't know what I would do without you." As Michael and Liam left the church, accompanied by Officer Johnson, they could hear Jack talking to the guests, his firm, reassuring voice explaining the situation and asking everyone to leave. The journey to the police station was surreal. Liam watched out the window of the police car, watching the familiar streets of his city go by as if it were all part of a dream. Everything looked the same, but at the same time, everything had changed forever. Michael sat next to her, unusually quiet, staring blankly as he watched the streets go by. When they arrived at the station, they were ushered into a small, simple room with a table and some chairs. "It's just a quiet place to talk without interruption," Officer Johnson assured them. Over the next few hours, Michael and Liam told their side of the story. Liam described the phone conversations he had overheard, Claire's physical and emotional abuse, and how he had discovered Simon's insurance policy and photos. Michael, still in shock, filled in the gaps with details of his relationship with Claire, trying to determine when everything had started to go wrong. As they chatted, more pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Claire had suggested increasing Michael's life insurance policy just a month after getting engaged, arguing that it was for Liam's sake, if something happened to his father. She had also been pushing him to do dangerous activities together, such as mountaineering, skydiving, and even swimming with sharks during their honeymoon. "I thought I was just adventurous," Michael said, his voice hollow. "I never imagined—" Liam took his father's hand, squeezing it tightly in an attempt to comfort him. Michael forced a small smile, grateful for his son's unwavering support. As the day progressed, more news began to arrive. Officer Rivera had managed to arrest Simon a few blocks from the church. Under cross-examination, Simon soon broke down, revealing the magnitude of the plan he and Claire had hatched. It turned out that Claire wasn't even her real name. Sarah Connors was a con artist with a long history of seducing wealthy men and then disappearing with their money. Simon was her partner in crime and her partner in life, and they had been running these types of scams for years. But they had never tried anything as ambitious or lethal as the plan they had prepared for Michael. The insurance policy Liam had discovered was just the tip of the iceberg. Claire or Sarah had been carefully manipulating Michael, isolating him from his friends and family, and had convinced him to change his will to leave everything to her. The plan was to arrange an accident during their honeymoon, collect Michael's insurance money and inheritance, and then disappear to start a new life together. With each new revelation, Michael looked more and more devastated. "How could I be so blind?" he muttered to himself. "How did I not realize what was happening?" Officer Johnson, who had been taking notes, looked up with a sympathetic expression. "Mr. Matthews, don't blame yourself. These people are professionals. They've done this before and they're very good at manipulating others. The important thing is that they were not successful, thanks to their son." Michael looked at Liam with a mixture of pride and lingering guilt. "You are right," he said quietly. "Liam saved my life today. Hopefully. I wish I'd heard it sooner." Liam, feeling a surge of love for his father, huddled beside him. "Okay, Dad, we're fine now." As day turned to night, the police still had no trace of Claire. He seemed to have vanished into thin air after fleeing the church. The officers assured Michael and Liam that they were doing everything they could to find her, but warned that Claire was an expert at disappearing. After officers finished the interview, they provided Michael and Liam with additional details about the search for Claire. "We have issued an alert to all local and state law enforcement," Officer Johnson explained in a firm tone. "We're also monitoring airports, bus stations, and rental car agencies, but I have to be honest, she has an advantage and knows how to cover her tracks." Michael nodded, exhausted both physically and emotionally. "I get it. Thank you for all you are doing." As they prepared to leave the station, Officer Johnson handed Michael a contact card. "If you remember anything else, or if Claire tries to reach you, please call me immediately, no matter the time." Michael put the card away, then leaned towards Liam. "Ready to go home, champion?" Liam nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of everything that had happened. "I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. It had been a long, tumultuous day." The journey back home was silent. Michael was driving with a tense expression, and Liam was lost in thought, watching the familiar streets of his town flash past the window. Everything looked the same. But for him, life would no longer be the same. Upon arriving home, Michael turned off the engine, but made no movement to get out of the car. He took a deep breath and turned to his son. "Liam," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology, a very big one." Liam looked at him in surprise. "Why, Dad?" Michael sighed deeply. "For not listening to you, for not realizing how Claire was treating you, and for putting you in danger by bringing her into our lives." Liam was silent for a moment, considering his father's words. Finally, he spoke with a maturity beyond his years. "Dad, you were just trying to be happy and make us happy. You couldn't tell what Claire was really like." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "But I should have seen how it was affecting you. I should have noticed that you weren't happy." Liam reached out and took his father's. "I didn't want to ruin things for you. You seemed so happy with her. I thought the problem was me." Michael's heart broke at those words. He pulled Liam toward him in a tight hug, not caring about the awkward angle of the car seats. "Never, Liam. You'd never be the problem. You're the best thing I have in life, and I'm so sorry if I ever made you doubt that." They stood there for a long moment, hugging each other and letting the tears flow freely. It was a catharsis for both of them, washing away the pain and fear of the last few months. Finally, Michael stepped away, wiping his eyes. "How about we walk in and order a ridiculous amount of pizza? I think we've earned it." Liam cracked a small smile. "Can we order it with stuffed dough?" Michael laughed, the sound somewhat choppy but genuine. "After everything you've done today, you can have the pizza you want." As they entered the house, They both felt as if a great burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Claire's shadow was still there, but now they felt a little safer facing her together. The following days were a whirlwind of activities. Michael and Liam's lives were turned upside down as they dealt with the aftermath of Claire's deception. There were more interviews with police, meetings with lawyers to undo the legal entanglement Claire had created, and endless calls from friends, family, and even reporters seeking details about the wedding day drama. Michael did his best to protect Liam from the worst, but there was no way to completely escape the reality of his situation. Claire was still at large, seemingly fainting into thin air after her escape from the church. The police kept Michael on top of the search, but as the days and weeks passed, hope of finding her began to fade. Simon, on the other hand, faced the full force of the law. In exchange for a plea bargain, he provided a wealth of information about Claire's deceptions and her network of accomplices. His testimony painted a picture of a sophisticated criminal operation that had been in operation for years, leaving a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts across the country. For Liam, the aftermath of the wedding day was a mix of relief and anxiety. She was glad that her father was safe and that Claire was no longer a part of their lives, but she couldn't shake the fear that she might one day return seeking revenge. Michael noticed his son's uneasiness and tried to reassure him. He installed a new security system in his home, complete with cameras and motion sensors, and made sure Liam knew he could come to him with any concerns, no matter how small. "We're a team, champion," Michael would say, ruffling his hair affectionately. "You and I against the world, remember?" Liam nodded each time, feeling a little more secure each time his father strengthened their bond. As the weeks passed, life slowly began to regain some normalcy. Michael threw himself into his work, taking on additional projects to keep his mind busy. Liam focused on school, finding solace in the familiar routine of classes and homework. One Saturday morning, about a month after the failed wedding, Michael and Liam were having breakfast when the doorbell rang. Michael tensed, still wary of unexpected visitors, but relaxed as he saw his friend Jack through the peephole. "Hey, dude," Jack said when Michael opened the door. "How are they coping?" Michael managed to smile tiredly. "We are holding on. Come in." Jack followed Michael into the kitchen where Liam finished his cereal. "Hey, little man," said Jack, fist-bumping Liam. "All right?" Liam nodded, returning the gesture with a shy smile. He had always been fond of Jack, who treated him like a person and not just a child. "So," Jack said, accepting a cup of coffee from Michael, "the boys and I have been talking and we think it's time for the two of you to get out of the house a bit. How about a camping trip next weekend?" Michael hesitated, looking at Liam. "I don't know, Jack. With everything that's happened—" "That's exactly why they need it," Jack insisted. "Just a few days away from all this." He made a broad gesture as if encompassing the entire house. No phones, no reporters, no lawyers. Just you, a few friends, a few tents and nature. Liam was encouraged by the idea. "Can we go fishing?" he asked, a twinkle of excitement in his eyes that Michael hadn't seen in weeks. Jack smiled broadly. "Of course, champion. We're going to catch enough to feed an entire army." Michael looked at his son's hopeful face and felt something come loose in his chest. Maybe it was exactly what they needed, a chance to breathe and remember what life was like before Claire came into their world. "Okay," he said, smiling as Liam's face lit up. "Let's do it." The camping trip turned out to be exactly what Michael and Liam needed. As they moved away from the city and into the dense forests of the state park, they both began to feel their tense muscles relax and their charged minds clear. They were accompanied by Jack and two of his longtime friends, Tom and Charlie, who had arranged the trip as an escape from the routine. They set up camp near a crystal-clear river, surrounded by majestic pine trees and a clear sky that promised star-filled nights. On the first afternoon, Jack helped Liam set up his tent, patiently teaching him each knot and how to secure it properly. As he did so, he whispered to Michael, "It's good to see this kid get back to being a kid." Liam, who had been quiet and distant for weeks after the wedding incident, began to open up little by little. For the first day, he delighted in learning how to pitch his tent, light a fire, and cast his fishing rod. The men shared stories by the campfire, talking about their childhood antics and their own adventures when they were young. Michael realized how much he needed that time for himself and his son. As she watched Liam laugh and play with others, she realized how important this kind of normalcy was after so many months of tension and fear. On the last night at camp, they sat around the campfire, watching the embers slowly fade into the darkness. The group had fallen silent, each lost in thought as the wind rustled through the trees. Michael looked at Liam, who was huddled in a chair by the fire, staring at the dancing flames. "Thank you, champion," Michael said softly, leaning toward his son. Liam looked up, his head slightly tilted. "Why, Dad?" Michael smiled, his eyes reflecting the dim light of the fire. "For being brave when I couldn't see what was happening. For saving us both." Liam snuggled a little closer to his father, feeling loved and protected. "We saved each other, Dad," he replied wisely, his words filled with an understanding beyond his years. The return trip was smooth, filled with a feeling of peace that they had both forgotten was possible. Michael and Liam returned home refreshed, and while Claire's shadow was still present, it no longer seemed to be the only thing defining their lives. Weeks passed, and life began to take a positive turn for both of them. Liam started a new school year, concentrating on his studies and making new friends. Michael, encouraged by his therapist, began to pick up old friendships he had put aside during his relationship with Claire, slowly rebuilding his support network. However, around 6 months after the failed wedding day, their lives changed once again. It was a cool autumn afternoon when Officer Johnson arrived at her door, his face serious. "Mr. Matthews," he said, when Michael invited him in, "we found Claire." Michael's heart raced. "Did they arrest her?" he asked, with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Officer Johnson shook his head, his tone dropping slightly. "No, sir. I'm afraid we found his body in a motel outside of Las Vegas. It looks like he took his own life." The news hit Michael like a physical blow. He stumbled backwards, leaning against the wall. "Dead," he murmured, barely aloud. Officer Johnson nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir, we think he had been there for a few days. We found a note." At that moment, Liam ran downstairs, stopping at the sight of the officer in the living room. "Dad?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. "Is everything okay?" Michael took a deep breath, knowing he couldn't hide the truth from his son. "Liam, come here," he said softly. "We need to talk." Liam walked over, looking suspiciously at Officer Johnson. "Is it about Claire?" he asked, his voice barely whispering. Michael nodded, directing Liam to the couch to sit together. "Yes, champion. The police found Claire she's dead." Liam fell silent, his mind processing the news. Then he looked up, his brow frowning with concern. "Are you okay, Dad?" Michael forced a small smile, though his heart was still pounding. "I don't know, champion. It's a lot to process." After Officer Johnson left, promising to keep them informed of any developments, Michael and Liam sat on the couch, both in silence. It was Liam who finally spoke, with a question that had been swirling in his mind. "Dad, do you think she really felt bad about what she did?" Michael sighed, running his hand through his hair. "I don't know, champion. People are complicated. Sometimes they do bad things and then regret it, but the important thing is that we learn from this and move forward." The news of Claire's death brought with it a strange feeling of closure. On the one hand, it marked the definitive end of a persistent threat, but it also stirred up a mixture of complex emotions that both Michael and Liam had to process for a while. They attended therapy sessions together, learning how to manage their emotions and strengthen their bond. Over time, Michael began to focus on being the best father possible, cherishing every moment he spent with his son. Liam, for his part, blossomed. The weight of secrecy and fear had lifted from his shoulders, and he became more outgoing in school, excelling in his studies and developing a taste for detective novels. On the 1-year anniversary of the failed wedding day, Michael and Liam decided to start a new tradition. They packed a picnic and drove to a beautiful state park, spending the day hiking, fishing, and just enjoying each other's company. As he sat by a crystal-clear lake watching the sunset, Michael turned to his son. "Liam, I've been thinking a lot about what happened last year," Michael said, looking at the golden light of the sunset reflected off the water. Yes, asked Liam, curious. Michael nodded, his eyes glistening in the light of the setting sun. I realized something important. What Claire did was terrible, but somehow she taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. What's that, Dad? Asked Liam. Michael smiled, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. It taught me that the most important relationship in my life, the one I should always prioritize, is right here, she said, gently tapping it on the chest. You and me, champion. We're a team, and nothing is going to change that. Liam smiled, throwing himself into his father's arms in a tight embrace. I love you, Dad, he murmured against Michael's chest. I love you too, champ, Michael replied, his voice filled with emotion. More than you can ever imagine. As they packed their picnic and headed home, they both felt a peace they hadn't experienced in a long time. The past year had been a roller coaster of emotions, filled with betrayal, fear, and uncertainty, but it had also strengthened their bond in ways they never could have imagined. As they drove back, with the stars beginning to shine in the night sky, Michael looked at Liam, who had fallen asleep during the drive. He smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for all he had managed to overcome. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. With Liam by their side, they could face whatever life threw at them. And so, as they neared his home, Michael knew that although the journey had been hard, their unbreakable love story between a father and son had grown stronger than ever before. As the months passed, Michael and Liam began to find a more stable rhythm in their lives. Although Claire's shadow had disappeared, the lingering effects of her betrayal and complex emotions continued to affect them. Both had learned to support each other and look for moments to enjoy the little everyday things. At school, Liam began to excel. Teachers noticed a change in him. He was more open, more involved in class, and seemed determined to learn and discover new things. He had developed a special interest in detective novels, and he often joked that he had a keen eye for detail. Michael, recognizing his son's natural knack for observation and his fascination with mystery stories, bought him an entire series of classic detective novels. I don't want you to become Sherlock Holmes, but I can live with a little Agatha Christie, he joked. Michael, on the other hand, was working on finding himself again. With her therapist's encouragement, she began to participate more in community activities and picked up old hobbies she had left behind, such as photography and nature walks. The therapy had helped him process his feelings of guilt and pain, teaching him to let go of responsibility for what happened to Claire. By focusing on her passions and reconnecting with friends, she slowly began to let go of the past. However, about a year and a half after the fateful wedding day, a new challenge presented itself unexpectedly. One morning, while Michael and Liam were having breakfast, the doorbell rang. Michael frowned, still wary of unexpected visitors, but when he opened the door, he found a man in a serious suit. Mr. Matthews, the man said, holding out a card. I'm attorney William Carter. I'm sorry to bother you so early, but there's something important we need to talk about. Michael was puzzled, but invited the man in. They sat the lawyer in the living room, and Michael sat across from him with Liam watching from the kitchen. Mr. Matthews, I am here in connection with the affairs of the late Claire, also known as Sarah Connors, Carter began, his tone professional but collected. Michael felt a knot in his stomach when he heard that name. He thought he had left everything about Claire behind, but this visit was a painful reminder of his past. What does this have to do with us? Asked Michael, his voice somewhat strained. Carter nodded, as if understanding Michael's discomfort. I know you've been through a lot, and I don't want to reopen old wounds, but Claire left a will with certain conditions that directly affect you and your son. The lawyer explained that before her death, Claire had drafted a final document in which she left her entire estate to Michael and Liam. Although the inheritance was not huge, it included a small property and a significant amount of money that he had accumulated throughout his deceptions. In addition, he had left a letter addressed to Liam and Michael. Liam, who had been listening from the doorway, came closer, his face a mixture of confusion and wariness. Why would he leave us anything? He asked, his voice low. Carter, seeing Liam, softened his tone. It's hard to know for sure what your intentions were, young man, but I think the letter could help to understand that. Michael hesitated for a moment, but eventually agreed to read the letter, for the sake of getting some sort of definitive closure. When the lawyer left them the letter, he withdrew to give them privacy, promising to return in case they needed further guidance on legal matters. Michael and Liam sat together on the couch, staring at the sealed envelope with trembling hands. After a moment of silence, Michael opened it and began to read aloud. Michael and Liam, I don't expect these words to make up for what I've done, or to change your feelings toward me. I know that what I did was unforgivable, and that I caused them irreparable harm. There is no justification for my actions, and I will not deceive myself into believing that I deserve his forgiveness. I have been a person full of mistakes, and in my desperation, I committed atrocities of which I am not proud. For a long time I have tried to justify my actions, but in the end, I know that I have been a coward who has harmed others out of greed and selfishness. Liam, you were the only ray of light in the midst of my darkness. I knew you were smart, that you saw things that others didn't. If at any time I made you feel like you weren't enough, I deeply regret it. You are a bright and brave young man, and I have always known that you were stronger and nobler than I am. I hope that one day you can find peace in knowing that you were brave enough to save your father from someone like me. Michael, there's nothing I can tell you that erases what I tried to do. I took advantage of your kindness and your love, and manipulated you for my own gain. It was despicable, and I am sincerely sorry that I caused so much harm to someone who was just trying to be happy and provide a family for her son. This money and property won't be able to repair the damage, but I hope it will at least give them a chance to move forward and build a life full of love and peace, something I couldn't do for myself. I am sorry for what I have done, and while I do not expect forgiveness, I want you to know that I am sorry. Sarah. Michael finished reading the letter, his voice muffled by the intensity of the moment. They both remained silent, processing what they had just heard. Liam, his eyes reddened, looked at his father. Do you think I really felt? He asked in a whisper. Michael let out a deep sigh. I don't know, champion, he replied sincerely. But it's not about what she felt. It's about how you feel and what we do with our lives from now on. Liam nodded slowly, letting his father's words settle. I want to put this behind me, Dad, he finally said. I want us to move on. Michael hugged his son tightly, tears well. That's exactly what we'll do, he promised. The months that followed were marked by a renewed sense of purpose for both of them. They used the inheritance to move into a new home, away from Claire's memories, and built a new life, supporting each other through difficult times and celebrating every little achievement. Michael found comfort in the connections he had renewed with his friends and in the tranquility of new beginnings, while Liam was strengthened in the security of knowing that he had been brave and honest in the moments he needed it most. Together, Michael and Liam discovered that despite the dark moments, there was always a light waiting at the end of the tunnel, and with every step they took forward, they knew that the bond between them was indestructible. As Michael and Liam tried to move on with their lives, they realized that their newfound stability was being watched closely by the community. News of Claire's death and her final letter had hit the media, sparking tabloid headlines and renewed interest in her story. For a while, Michael and Liam had to deal with reporters and onlookers who wanted an exclusive or some statement. Michael became protective, keeping Liam out of the spotlight and avoiding any public comment. One day, as the two were walking through their neighborhood together, Liam noticed a familiar figure approaching from across the street. It was a girl from his school, Sophie, with whom he had worked on a school project before everything related to Claire began. Sophie approached hesitantly, with a worried expression. Liam, he said quietly, can I talk to you for a moment? Michael looked at Liam, giving him a nod of approval. Liam took a deep breath and walked over to Sophie. What's wrong? He asked, his tone firmer than he felt. I wanted to tell you that I'm so sorry for what happened, Sophie said, her eyes showing genuine compassion. I know this must have been really hard for you, and if you ever need to talk to someone, I'm here. Liam wasn't sure how to respond at first. Sophie's words were sincere, but they were the first words anyone from her school had spoken to her since the story had become public. Finally, he nodded with a small smile and thanked him. After a brief chat about the school and its classes, Sophie left, leaving him with a strange feeling of relief. That small gesture of kindness marked a turning point for Liam. He began to feel less isolated, slowly accepting that he was not alone in his healing process. Michael, observing this change in his son, felt proud of how Liam handled his emotions and his ability to connect with others through it all. The following months brought new opportunities for both. Michael received an offer to lead a community program that would help people deal with trauma, especially those related to loss and deception. Michael's experience had allowed him to deeply understand grief and recovery, and he accepted the position in hopes of helping others find the same peace he was seeking. Liam, on the other hand, continued to excel at school, but his passion for mysteries did not go unnoticed. His literature teacher, Miss Taylor, suggested that he start a detective writing club, as many of his classmates also shared his fascination with mystery stories. At first, Liam was reticent, but he soon realized that the club not only offered him an avenue for his creativity, but also a way to help others channel their own challenges and concerns through writing. One afternoon, during a club meeting, one of the members shared a story about how a young woman discovered the truth about a hidden villain in her life. As they discussed the topics of trust, betrayal, and bravery, Liam noticed something in the conversation that made him realize how much he had grown. He was no longer just a child trying to protect his father. He had become someone who could face his fears and move forward with the certainty that he had done the right thing. At home, Michael and Liam had developed a number of traditions that brought them together. On Saturday nights, they cooked together, choosing a new recipe each week. On Sunday afternoons, they would go for a walk in a nearby park, often discussing the detective books they were reading. In the process, they had found ways to build happy memories that replaced old moments of grief. But for all the progress, a lingering echo of the past was still present in their lives. One night while they were having dinner, Michael received a call from Officer Johnson. "Mr. Matthews," the officer began cautiously, "I know it's late, but I thought I should inform you before I see you on the news. Simon, Claire's accomplice, has agreed to a plea deal and will provide information about other victims and crimes they were involved in." Michael was silent for a moment, trying to process the news. She had tried to forget Simon and everything that had happened to Claire, but this call reminded her that her story still had consequences. "What does that mean for us?" he finally asked. "It means that the case against him is being closed," Johnson explained, "but it also means that there will be more media coverage, at least for a while. I wanted to warn him so that he would be prepared." Michael thanked the officer for his consideration and hung up, turning his attention back to Liam, who had been listening quietly. "What happened?" asked Liam, his voice somewhat muffled. "Simon is cooperating with the police," Michael replied, trying to maintain a calm tone. "That might mean more news and attention for a while, but you don't have to worry about it. I'm here to protect you from everything." Liam looked at him, noticing the tension in his voice. "Dad, you don't have to protect me from everything," he said firmly. "We've already been through the worst. We can handle this together." Michael smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. It had been a difficult journey, but she had learned to trust her son's strength as much as her own. As Simon's case was resolved and the media attention eventually faded, Michael and Liam managed to find a new sense of normalcy. The two began exploring new activities together, such as photography and nature walks, rediscovering their surroundings and taking the opportunity to create positive memories in new places. A year later, on a sunny spring day, Michael and Liam found themselves on top of a hill, looking out over a sprawling landscape unfolding before them. They had come a long way together, and as they gazed at the horizon, they both realized something. What had really kept them afloat was not the absence of pain, but the strength of their bond. "You know, Dad," Liam said, breaking the silence with a smile, "I'm glad we've made it this far. I know it wasn't easy, but I'm glad we did it together." Michael looked at his son, his heart full of gratitude and pride. "Me too, champion," he replied sincerely. "And we always will." The next few months were one of transition and growth for both Michael and Liam. Although the story with Claire and Simon still resonated in the community, their lives began to pivot toward new opportunities. new friends, and new perspectives. Liam, increasingly immersed in the detective writing club, was developing a knack for constructing intriguing plots. Miss Taylor, his teacher, noticed his ability to observe details and suggest unexpected twists in stories, earning Liam the recognition of his classmates. Inspired by the accounts of his peers and his own experience, he decided to write his first long story, a juvenile detective tale starring a boy named Ben who discovers a mystery in his neighborhood. Ben's story was not only a reflection of his imagination, but also a way to process what he had experienced. Michael, for his part, had begun leading the community program and soon became a respected figure in the community. His empathetic approach and ability to listen without judgment allowed him to help people dealing with loss or trauma similar to what he had experienced. Over time, she even began giving talks at schools and support groups, sharing her story not as a tragedy, but as a lesson in resilience. One day, during one of those talks, Michael decided to talk about a topic he had rarely touched on in public: guilt. As he addressed the audience, made up of parents, educators, and teens, he shared what he had felt during those dark times with Claire and how he had struggled to forgive himself. He spoke candidly about the importance of not allowing mistakes to define who we are, but how we choose to deal with the consequences. "We all make mistakes," Michael said, his voice firm but calm. "Sometimes we trust the wrong people, or we fail to see what's right in front of us. The important thing is not only to learn from those mistakes, but also to find the courage to stand up, protect those we love, and move forward." Michael's words resonated deeply with those present. At the end, several parents approached him to thank him for his honesty, while some teenagers looked at him with admiration, surprised by his openness. Michael came away from that talk feeling lighter, as if by sharing his story, he was freeing himself from the weight of guilt and pain he had carried for so long. Liam, for his part, found a new sense of purpose in writing. Ben's story evolved into a series of short stories, each introducing a new mystery that he solved in his neighborhood with the help of his friends. Miss Taylor was so impressed by his abilities that she suggested submitting one of his stories to a youth literary contest. Liam, though unsure at first, accepted the challenge. When the day came to announce the results, Liam wasn't sure what to expect. He had put all his effort into history, but he knew there were plenty of other talented youngsters competing. To his surprise, his story won second place. Although it wasn't the first award, for Liam it was a validation of all his hard work and a sign that his passion could lead him to great things. While celebrating at home, Michael hosted a small dinner to commemorate Liam's achievement. He made his son's favorite pizza with stuffed dough, and the two sat in the living room, reminiscing about how far they'd come together. The conversation revolved around how the two of you had helped each other overcome difficulties, and how important it was to find something that you were passionate about and that would propel you forward. "I'm proud of you, champion," Michael said, toasting with a soda. "Not just because of your story, but because of the person you're becoming." Liam smiled, raising his glass. "Thank you, Dad. I'm proud of you too." Time continued to move on, and while Claire's footprints were still present, they became more diffuse with each new step they took. Michael began dating again, but this time with caution and a focus on being honest with himself and others. He met Anna, a woman with whom he shared an interest in photography and the outdoors. Anna not only understood her past, but she respected it, allowing Michael to take things at his own pace. Although the relationship was nascent, it gave Michael a new perspective on love and trust. Liam also experienced a significant change. At the detective club, he reached out to Sophie, and soon discovered that they both shared a passion for solving mysteries and creating stories. Over time, their friendship grew stronger and became something more, a connection based on mutual understanding and support. A year later, during a hike in the park where they used to go on weekends, Michael and Liam came to a clearing with panoramic views of the mountains. They paused for a moment, gazing at the landscape in silence. Words were not necessary. Both understood the meaning of the moment. "You know something, Dad," Liam finally said, breaking the silence. "I've been thinking that everything that happened not only changed us, but made us stronger." Michael nodded with a soft smile. It's true, champion. Life is not always easy, but together we can overcome anything. Do you think Claire or Sarah? Have I really felt any guilt? Asked Liam, looking at him curiously. Michael sighed, taking a moment before answering. I don't know, Liam. Maybe we'll never know. But it's not about what she felt or didn't feel. It's about how we choose to live our lives based on what we've learned. Liam thought for a moment before nodding slowly. You're right. We can't change the past, but we can make sure we don't repeat it. As they drove home, they both realized that while Claire's story had been painful and difficult, it had also taught them to value what really mattered. Their unwavering love as father and son, their ability to face challenges together, and the importance of moving forward, no matter how dark the road gets. Michael and Liam's story stopped being just a narrative of betrayal and redemption, and became a tale of growth, love, and hope. Together, they had found a way to turn pain into strength and fear into resilience, proving that even in the worst circumstances, there is always an opportunity to build a better future. Over time, Michael and Liam understood that the true value of a story is not in the tragedies we face, but in the connections we create and the strength we find to move forward. Together, they had turned their grief into an unbreakable bond, and learned that life, while sometimes uncertain and full of unexpected twists, always offers new opportunities to grow, love, and heal. And so, with the future before them, they faced the world knowing that no matter what, they would always be by each other's side, ready for whatever adventure awaited them.